Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Um, if you saw the title, this is a story time about how my employer treated me like shit for getting pregnant after being hired and tried to force abortion on me. So I'm just gonna jump right into it and get started because it is kind of a long video. Alright, so before I officially start, I am just saying I have notes written down because I am scatterbrained. It is late at night, and Sebastian is asleep next to me, and so I just wanted to be able to stay on track. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on my history with this employer before I jump into the incredibly crazy, almost unbelievable story of how my employer treated me like shit. I got hired in February of 2018 after I quit my job at Pick and Save. And I actually loved the company when I first started working there. I thought everyone was very nice. They were respectful. You know, they cared about their clients. And that's how they came off. I don't know if it was they came off that way to all the new employees or if they only came off that way to people who fit their idea of a good employee. When I first got hired, I was respected, you know. They always asked me to come cover shifts, you know. I was always working. I loved it. I loved my job. I loved helping people. When I was in high school, I was in a program like it. I worked for a company called Homes for Independent Living, or HILL. And yeah, so I was in behavioral homes when I was in high school. And so I was really excited to be a staff member because when I was in these programs, the staff made such a huge impression on me. They left an impact. It made me want to be a better person, get my life together. And that's what I wanted to do for these people that I worked for. However, within a month of working, I found out I was pregnant. My ex and I were trying at the time, but we were also told that we weren't able to get pregnant. So I didn't think it was actually going to happen, especially so soon into working a new job. Right away, I told my employer that I was pregnant because I just wanted them to know, and I wanted to ask them about the maternity leave information because I didn't know what it was like and the qualifications and everything. They told me right away that I do not qualify for FMLA because by the time my son will be born, I will only have worked there for 9 months, and I have to be working there for a year, I believe, plus 1,500 hours. And I would have only reached the 1,500 hours. And when I told her, okay, whatever, it's fine, she told me I might as well quit since I'm not getting maternity leave, and they weren't going to make an exception, which I thought was incredibly harsh considering I never made a big deal about it once they told me. I just kind of accepted it, and I was going to figure it out because they told me that they would give me unpaid leave. So I was willing to make that sacrifice. After that, I was constantly getting reprimanded. And I was just, people were making really rude comments to me. And not like my coworkers. Like, they were actually really nice and helpful. The higher ups were making disrespectful comments. And every time I had a doctor's appointment, the whole pregnancy and the whole time I worked there, I would request off, even though I worked third shift. You know, I would be in contact with my employer. So I didn't miss meetings and stuff like that. And when I would request off, they'd give it to me. But then I would get a text like early in the morning saying, "Oh, we have a meeting at this time and it's mandatory." And so I would text my boss back and tell them like, "Hey, I told you guys that I have a doctor's appointment at 10:30. I can't make it in for this 10:15 meeting." And they'd actually get mad at me and tell me that I'll lose hours and I can get fired if I don't show up to these meetings. And even when I called them and told them, I requested off this day and I got the day off, I'm not coming in, they would still reprimand me. I got suspended from work about 4 times due to getting requested days off and then having come in for meetings and telling them I wouldn't. I did snap at my employer at one point. And just for stupid shit that I didn't do. When I was about 3 months pregnant, I was struggling because my grandma just passed away and the pregnancy was getting really, really hard on me. And I ended up in the hospital. And when I called my employer to tell her that I was in the hospital, she told me that I really need to highly consider abortion because it is affecting the company. And why? Why would it affect the company? And why should it matter if I'm having a baby or not? So I'm pretty sure I texted my coworker who was also pregnant, who was pregnant when she got hired, and asked if she was being treated this way. And she informed me she wasn't. So it was just a little crazy to me that I was being treated differently and that I went from like a very respected employee to basically scum of the earth within a matter of weeks. By this point, I was working 12-hour shifts almost every day, and if I was lucky, I'd get a day off a week. And I was hired for, I believe, every other weekend off. And I counted it when I got my schedule. I would work probably 10 weekends in a row before I got a weekend off. I'd probably get a day here and there off. And I think I was supposed to get then 2 days off a week. I was only supposed to work, I think, 4 days a week. And they had me basically at 6 or 7 days a week, every week. So I had my doctor. Well, I didn't have my doctor. I was telling her the situation. And because of, like all the tests they were running, she wrote them a note saying that I'm not allowed to work more than 8-hour shifts. And she asked me if I wanted to put in like a maximum amount of days for working, and I told her no, because 8 hours a day, I could work every day without days off. And for the first week after I handed the note in, they followed it, they agreed to it, and then they had me at 13 to 14-hour shifts every day again. And when I told my scheduler, hey, like, I'm not supposed to have this many hours, she got mad at me and told me if you weren't pregnant, you'd be able to handle it. You need to consider not being pregnant anymore. It had nothing to do with me being pregnant. It's that I was hired for something, and so actually it totally had to do with me being pregnant. But I was hired for certain days and a certain schedule, and I wasn't getting that. I was getting more, and I was being overworked. Shortly after that whole situation, I was probably like 4 or 5 months pregnant, I believe. And we got a new client on the other side of the duplex, which we didn't have for a while. And he was highly violent. At least that's what his paper said. And it was honestly kind of intimidating because I didn't want to work with a violent client when I was pregnant. So there was another problem between me and my employer. I asked them, because of what I heard from my other coworkers a few weeks after I worked with him, I asked if I could switch and asked if I could only work on the other side with the girl that I had a good relationship with that wasn't violent whatsoever. And the scheduler and the higher up both told me, and I quote, "Unless you end up getting attacked or something happens to your son, or if he becomes stillborn or you miscarry, we will not let you switch sides." And I lost it in the office. I cried. Because how could you look at a mother-to-be in the eyes and tell her, unless you lose your child, we're not going to meet your basic needs? And honestly, this was not an unreasonable, request. And also in Wisconsin, when it comes to pregnancy, employers cannot deny reasonable requests. And after about 2 or 3 weeks of me basically begging to be switched, they told me, "We've made enough accommodations for you. You need to work with him." And the thing is, they never did make accommodations. The only accommodation they made was 8-hour shifts, and that was only for a week. So I had it, and I was like, whatever. I work third shift. I'll just do it. Whatever. There were a few times, because I worked third shift, so I usually didn't come in to work until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So I never was in contact with this client's parents. There were a few times, probably once or twice a week, where I'd come in at 6 p.m. and leave the next day at 6 a.m. And that just happened to be the night his mom called. And I guess she knew that there were 2 pregnant employees because she asked me if I was the other pregnant girl. And of course I told her yeah. And because of him lashing out, because this is a point where he was starting to lash out a few times, she told me she did not want me working with him personally, even though I'm third shift. And I told her she'd have to take that up to the higher ups because I'd be more than happy to follow with that. And I thought that was my out, that I would be with the other client and it wasn't going to be an issue. Well, come to find out 2 weeks later, she calls again, and it happened to be the day where I came in at 6 p.m. And she was actually shocked and upset that I was working because she told them, me and my other coworker who was pregnant were not allowed to work with him. She didn't want us to work with him until the babies were born. So I heard this straight from his mom. And I then found out, because I believe I texted my coworker and asked her if she was still working with him, and she told me no. Whatever. When I informed the higher-ups that this call took place, they pushed abortion again. They pushed just horrible things on me. I was told that I clearly wasn't smart enough to not get pregnant, that I should have been on birth control, all that kind of stuff. And then, so they would not switch me still. And I was obviously pissed about that because, first of all, my pregnant coworker switched. His mom requested that I didn't work there, and they didn't care. One night, I think it was a night where I came in at maybe 8 p.m. instead of 6 p.m., and it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. I was finishing my cleaning, and he was awake. And at first he came out to the bathroom, and I didn't think much of it because he usually came out once a night to go to the bathroom at least. And, you know, I said hi to him, and he just went straight to his room again. And then probably about 10 minutes later, he comes out. And he's standing there. He's pacing a little bit. I was a little nervous, and I knew being a client in a place like that and a staff, never have your back in a corner and never have your back to your client. But because I was cleaning and he's never given me trouble, I didn't think about it. And he starts babbling. And I'm like, whatever, you know? It will pass. And so the counter's here. So the edge of the counter is right here. And I'm facing it. He comes up behind me and he shoves me as hard as he can into the counter. And because I'm caught off guard, he could have barely pushed me also, and I probably would have hit the counter. But this was full force. I don't know what I did to him. And I hit my stomach straight on. Like, I'm a short person, but the counter lined up perfectly with the center of my belly. And instantly, I started being in pain. I couldn't walk. I was terrified. And I walked away from him, and he started screaming a little bit and then went to his room. And I called the staff that was supposed to come in the next morning and asked them if they could come in an hour early. You know, I believe I called on call and told them what happened, and they told me to fill out an incident report or whatever it was, and I did. And I told them I'm going to the hospital. And I also informed them, if they don't let me switch sides, I will not be coming back. And because they can't keep employees, they said we could switch sides. But when I came back to fill out a workers' comp packet, I had a meeting with the staff because apparently it was my fault. And they basically told me that I can either switch sides or I can... So, either I can switch sides and I have to be working those 12-hour shifts, or I can stay on his side and continue working the 8-hour shifts. So basically, I had to choose between doctor's orders and my safety. So I chose the long hours. But I was still getting crap from my employers. It was basically the same kind of stuff. At one point, one of the higher-ups told me that I deserved to miscarry. And another one told me, and I kid you not, that this was actually said, And I was so devastated. I don't know why I didn't report this or take it up legally. They told me I deserve to have a stillborn, and they hope my son is stillborn. It was literally like high school, and it was ridiculous. After that, I requested off for a few days because that was so horrible. I needed time to just be away from them. All right, and so the ending of this story time, which is really long, and I'm so sorry, guys. When I was about 7 months pregnant, right before I quit, I brought up maternity leave again, and I told them, you know, I wanted at least 2 weeks off, so that way I could just have time with my baby. I believe, Caleb was not working still, and I told them it would just give me time to be with the baby, and, you know, because Caleb was wanting to work and try to find work, and so I could just be with the baby. He could work a little bit, and I'd come home, and I could relax. I could heal as much as possible in 2 weeks. And they told me, including the hospital stay of like going in and getting admitted, delivering the baby, and the rest day at the hospital, I would only get 3 days. So if the hospital wanted me to stay for 4, well, SOL, really. I have to go in. And I wasn't having that because as a human being, I deserved more than 3 days. As a new mother, I deserve more than 3 days. And in that meeting, I brought up about breastfeeding and pumping at work because in Wisconsin, they have to provide me a sanitary, safe, clean, private environment that is not a bathroom. And so I asked them if I could pump in the office or the living room or the kitchen or even the garage, which the living room and the kitchen were not private. The garage was not sanitary. The only perfect place would be the office. And because, you know, pumping takes a while, I didn't want to do it in the bathroom anyways. And they told me that they would not give me a place to pump, that I would have to do it in the bathroom. And when I did threaten to bring it up with a lawyer, they told me that I don't stand a chance and they can retaliate. So my final words for anyone who's looking for a job, especially in Wisconsin, in the Racine area and Manitowoc and Green Bay and Sheboygan and probably Appleton and all other areas that Homes for Independent Living is at, for the love of God, especially if you're pregnant, especially if you just like people, do not apply there. The pay is not that great. I ended up taking a pay cut at a different job for the last 2 months of my pregnancy, and they allowed me to have a few weeks off, unpaid. So, God, I just can't believe employers can say shit like this and get away with it. So, that's the end of my story time. If you guys want to hear more story times, trust me, I have a bunch. And they won't be this long. So let me know if you want more story times. And I'm going to be uploading his 6-month appointment on the 13th. And I will try to also upload this weekend. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any video suggestions, message me on Instagram, you know, comment on my story, whatever you want to do. So with that, I'm going to call it a night and see you guys in the next video. Bye.